Hey everyone, you are here for the 100th episode. How did that happen? Of Litvak Leadership Live. It seems like just yesterday I started doing this. Matter of fact, Alan was one of my first 5 guests, and he's back. So, Alan, welcome back to Litvak Leadership Live.
Thanks for having me back on the 100th episode. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, Alan represents Reflex Protect, so I want to give them a shout out while we're all here. We're not necessarily talking about that today unless Alan can weave it into his story. But Alan had a very unique experience in his life that most of us will never have, is that Alan not only spent half an hour with a former president one-on-one, but he spent half an hour with the one and only President Ronald Reagan. So that's what we're going to be talking about today is the conversation they had and the wisdom, understanding, and knowledge that was Ronald Reagan. So, Alan, why don't you weave the tale and I'll jump in with questions.
Certainly, Sean. And I think for the listeners here, how I met him, I think there's a lot of lessons and importance there. And so it was the summer of 1992, June, and I had started a job at Burger King, and I was making Whoppers. And if you don't get this hand motion, this is how you make Whoppers. Because that flame broiler, you actually pull the Whoppers out of a freezer, you break the frozen Whopper off, and you toss it onto a conveyor belt. And then you run around to the other end, and when the burgers come out of the conveyor belt, you pick them up, put them on a bun, put them in a warming tray. I'm killing Burger King's secrets now. And when somebody orders it, that's when you take it out of the warming tray, put it in the microwave real quick, zap it, then slap on your mayonnaise and lettuce and stuff.
Wow.
And on your way. But I was flame broiling burgers. And I had this idea. I wanted to meet my former commander-in-chief, President Ronald Reagan. I went into the military in 1985, so he was my first commander-in-chief. I told some friends that were working there at Burger King with me the idea, and they just laughed. But I went home that night, got out the word processor. You know, this is back before email and computers and fancy stuff like that. And I wrote a letter, printed it out, and signed it, put it in an envelope, mailed it off to his office in California. Went back the next day and told the folks at Burger King. They laughed again and said, "Get back to burgers, burger boy. You're not going to meet the president, former president of the United States." And I just laughed. Like, well, we'll see. I had good luck with writing letters to people before.
Okay.
A week later, I come home from Burger King and the answering machine light was flashing. For those of us old enough to remember answering machines.
Oh, yeah.
And the cassette ones, right? So I pushed play, and it was Mr. John Hall from President Reagan's office, and he gave me a number to call. It was too late to call that day, so I had to wait till the next day, called the number, and Mr. Hall started asking why I wanted to meet the president. And I told him the truth. I had been in the military, and he was my first commander-in-chief. I was currently a student at the University of Montana, going to college on the GI Bill. I respected and admired the things that President Reagan had done, and it was inspirational and motivational to have a chance to meet him. And I was going to be in California a little bit later that summer. And Mr. Hall said, "I'm sorry, President Reagan will be out of town campaigning for President Bush." It was summer of 1992, election year. So, not going to let that stop me. I was like, "What about Christmas break? I might be in California on Christmas break." And he's like, "Well, why don't you call us back in October and we'll see." October came around. You know, and at the time, I had no thoughts of going to California on Christmas break, but I really was going to be there that summer, but I was going to let an opportunity pass it up. So October came, I called. You know, they patched me through to Mr. Hall, and I remember him saying, "Would you remind me why you want to meet the president while I pull your file?" And I'm thinking, okay, they have a file on me.
Oh, yeah. Full military record, probably. Everything.
And so I went through the thing again about being a former, military, and he was my commander in chief, and how I was in college, going on the GI Bill. It would be inspirational, motivational to meet him. And he asked if I could be there on January 5th. And I said, yes, I can. And he said, 10 o'clock in the morning work? And I was like, yes, it does. And we had the date and time set. He said, we'll see you there. Please report to the security desk when you come into the building, and they will escort you up to the top floor. So
Okay.
I hung up the phone and I called my sister and said, I'm coming to visit you in January, because she lived in Southern California. So at least I had a place to stay. And so January comes around. Originally, I was going to drive down. Weather got bad, and I was worried about the roads, so I paid for a plane ticket and I flew down.
Okay.
And I rented a car when I was down there to be with my sister. The day came, I drove up, and this was sort of cool because I'm a tough guy movie fan. You know, couple of the books I wrote are called Tough Guy Wisdom. They're movie quotes.
Mm-hmm.
I show up and I drive into this parking lot at the address where I'm supposed to go, and I look up at the Die Hard building.
Wow.
The exterior shots of the building in the movie Die Hard were the Fox building, which is where President Reagan had his offices up at the top. So here I am in front of the Die Hard building, looking up, about to go in to meet the former president.
Oh, my.
So that was just a little bonus, sort of really cool thing. I'm going to be up at the top of the Die Hard building. I went in. I went to the security desk like they had told me. I gave them my name and ID. They escorted me up to the top. I was greeted by a receptionist. Then Mr. Hall came out and said, it'll be just a moment. I'll be able to introduce you to the president. I see you brought a camera and some books. I can take those for you. Because I had brought along his autobiography and the book Speaking My Mind, which was his speeches. So I had both of those hardcover books that I brought along with me. So a few minutes later, he came and said, Mr. Burrese, you can come with me. He took me into President Reagan's office and introduced me to him. And then he sort of just faded into the background. And he took some photographs with his camera and my camera in the background. But he just stayed out of the way for that whole half an hour until the meeting was done. And then he sort of, interjected then when it was time to, start wrapping things up.
Sure.
That half an hour, it was just President Reagan and I, and we didn't sit down. We walked around the office. So he took me to the windows and we looked outside. We were looking at things on the wall and pictures. He would tell stories. Just a fantastic half an hour.
So what did he tell you about?
The first and foremost thing that he did, obviously, I was nervous. Who wouldn't be nervous? You're meeting as the United States. And he put me right at ease. And he actually apologized that we couldn't see Catalina Island because of the fog. He said on a clear day, you can see the island from out the window here. And that it just, he just talked like, a grandfather. I mean, he was old enough to be, he was a grandfather in those times, and just put me at ease right away. And I think one of the most important things that I really learned from that was he earned the name the Great Communicator. And he wasn't just a great communicator for a public address, which, he was one of the best.
Yes.
Tip O'Neill, who was a Democrat, the Speaker of the House back then, was quoted as saying Ronald Reagan was one of the best speakers, period. And he's put him above Kennedy and Eisenhower and Roosevelt and some of those others. And so he was a great public speaker, but he also had that interpersonal connection. I am positive that he treated me, a college kid from Montana, the same as he treated anyone else, whether it was a president or prime minister of a foreign country or whoever. He made that connection. And that was just, I think, so important. And what a great lesson to learn. it also, again, he was treating me, a college kid from Montana, who, with the respect and everything that he would do anyone else. And I think that's a really powerful lesson to learn.
So what questions did you ask him? You must have had some.
It was funny because it was the way the conversation went. He sort of led the conversation, me being a little nervous. Like he's like, I want to show you something. And he took me over to the windows and he showed me the fake buildings of the Fox studios. Because up from above, when you look down, you can see, all these fake buildings and stuff in the studios. And so showing me those and things out the window. And then he told a lot of stories about the people that he was with in different photographs.
Okay.
One I remember, he was good friends with Margaret Thatcher. And there was a picture of the two of them, and he spoke really well of her and their love of horses. Both of them loved horses. And so he talked about how she was quite the horse lady, and that they both enjoyed their time together. And then they liked talking about horses and the times that they had with those. He asked me what I was doing at the time.
Uh-huh.
I was at college, and I said, I was actually working in the food service. I wasn't at Burger King anymore. That was just the summer. I was working in the food service at the University of Montana for some extra money going to school. And he told me one of his favorite jobs was washing dishes.
Really?
He said it was in the cafeteria of the girls' dormitory when he was in we did talk a little politics. It was January of '93. President Clinton was about to be inaugurated in a couple there. And I asked him what he thought of President Clinton. And, he said, we're going to have to see how he can work with the Congress and the Senate for the best of our country. He never said anything negative about anybody. But he did say he wanted to see how the president could work with the House and the Senate for the best of our country. And he felt that President Clinton and any ongoing president should have a line item veto. He talked about how he had the line item veto in California, and he thought it was a good tool for the governor. And he felt it would be a good tool for the president as well, because, you get this giant budget handed to you, and you had to pass it yes or no. He thought having the power to go in and pass it except for this one, and having the line item veto would help the president work better with the Senate and the House to get things done, especially when you're talking about the budgetary things. So that was one thing I remember him, discussing that was, politics was, even though he was out of office, he thought the line item veto should be enacted for President Clinton and forward presidents.
That is pretty amazing. Did he talk about his original career as either being on radio or as an actor at all?
We talked a little bit about that, and he thought that prepared him and gave him the experience to talk and to communicate, with the foreign leaders and such. And one of the most proud things, we talked about it because there were some pictures in his wall, was the wall, or there were pictures of the wall coming down on his wall. That was a very proud moment of his that, we discussed that he felt was very important. Obviously he was very pro freedom, democracy.
Indeed.
And against communism. And he just thought that was an important milestone that he was proud to be part of, that he could assist with that opening up of Germany like that, with the wall coming down in Berlin.
So, silly question as it sounds, how was he dressed? Was he relaxed? Was he in a suit?
He was in a suit. If you go to Black Belt Communicator on Facebook, in the banner, there is a picture of him and I, but he was in a suit. I was in a shirt and tie. Well, again, I was a college student, didn't have as big a wardrobe back then. I didn't have a suit on. I had a shirt and tie, not slacks, but he was in a suit.
That is amazing. So when he was taking you around to the pictures, and he pointed out Margaret Thatcher, and he pointed out, and told you how acting and being on the radio had prepared him for talking to other foreign leaders. Did he mention any other foreign leaders that he had an affinity with?
We talked a little bit about Gorbachev.
Okay.
They had a relationship, and he talked about how he enjoyed their relationship and how they were to work together. He talked about the other presidents.
This will be good.
There was a picture of, and I actually think I have that picture here in my office too, of him and the 4 other presidents at the presidential library.
Oh, okay.
So at the presidential library, when they opened his library, it had him and President Bush and President Ford, President Nixon, and President Carter, the 5 of them. And so we talked a little bit about the presidential library and how, he was very pleased with that. And, having at the time, having the 5 living presidents was, a pretty big deal to have them all together and such. And so we talked a little bit about that. And I actually went to the presidential library after that meeting with him, because it's that far of a drive from where the Century Fox building was up to where the presidential library was. And I had the rest of the afternoon. So I actually drove up there, and they offered to set up a special, thing for me. And I said, no, that's fine. I'm just going to go up there and just browse around and such, and went up there and did that.
So the elephant in the room question: were there jelly beans on his desk?
Yes, there were. There were jelly beans in the office. I thought you were going to ask about Nancy, because
okay. So tell us about Nancy.
I didn't get to meet her. She wasn't there that day. I was shown her office, and they apologized that she wasn't there that day, and I didn't get a chance to meet her.
And did he have any advice on marriage? Because he certainly seemed to be enamored and loved his wife.
He definitely did. I mean, from the books and things that I have read, at that time, I was nowhere near getting married.
This is true.
So that wasn't a topic, that I was more the washing dishes in the girls' dormitory was a better story than marriage for me at that time.
So I'm sure the 2 of you talked about the military also, since that was your, entree to see him. What did he have to say, and what did you all talk about?
We didn't talk a lot about the military. He thanked me for serving, but I told him that I served with the 82nd Airborne Division, and then that I was with the 2nd ID Scout Sniper School in South Korea, and was now going to college on the GI Bill. And he thanked me for serving, but we didn't really go much more into that.
Okay.
And I know he talked about other pictures, and I'm having trouble remembering some of those now. Because, he had pictures all over the wall. And I remember the one was the 4 presidents. I remember him and Gorbachev. I remember him and Margaret Thatcher. And there were some other pictures. He talked some about his family. He had pictures of his family there, too. And he did talk about Nancy and how having her with him was so important.
So
you remember him saying that it was important for her support throughout all the years was so important to him.
And it's funny. I was talking to my mother the other day, and when I told her about our interview, her immediate comment to me was, well, you know that President Reagan had Alzheimer's, and Nancy Reagan was running the country in those last years. So, and I was like, I don't think so. So how did he seem to you with his faculties and his communication skills? Because you say he was the great communicator. Did he seem to still have a grip on everything?
He did. would never have guessed he had any problems when we were talking. Because I said he would see a picture and say, "Oh, he'd talk about Margaret Thatcher, say, oh, she was such a horse lady," and he would just go and from one thing to another, and like I said, he'd remember back, and so it didn't seem any problems when I was speaking with him.
Yeah, he just always, at the time he was in office, I did not appreciate him. But looking back on history and his leadership and his oratory skills and just the steely determination in his eyes, I think is something that as a country we could all use.
I think we could too. And I think we could use the demeanor he had, even with those on the other side. I mentioned Tip O'Neill a minute ago, who, talks about his oratory skills and his speaking ability. Those two were, almost polar opposites on some topics.
Sure.
But they never called each other names. They got along and they worked together as best they could for, their parties. And I think we need more of that. And we don't need so much fighting as we need working together. And I think, people like Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan are good examples of people that could work together and be civil, even though they had very differing positions on things.
So did he speak at all about any of his dealings with the Democrat Party and how he worked with them?
Not that I remember offhand. I mean, I remember, when he was talking about President Clinton, they'd have to work together, and, the House and the Senate and the president have to work together. He did talk, and I don't remember exactly.
Okay.
Talked about the wall. That was something very proud, in Berlin Wall. He talked about other things that they had accomplished in his administration, but I don't remember the specifics as well. Because he did talk about some other things that he was proud of that they accomplished for our country in those 8 years, but I don't remember the specifics off the top of my head, being so long ago.
So when you walked out and, the door closed behind you, and I guess you were ushered downstairs, I'm sure you weren't said, okay, just go down the elevator. Once you stepped outside the building, what were your thoughts?
I was just sort of in awe, just, almost a disbelief, like, wow. And I'm looking at the books, because I had the books in my hand, and, he had signed them for me and such. And yeah, it was just sort of an awe. And then I got in the vehicle and I drove up to the museum, and I just went around the museum and looking at things, but then thinking, wow, yeah, he talked about that, because there's a big piece of the Berlin Wall out back of the museum. So,
Sure.
They're behind that at that big piece of the wall saying, yeah, we just talked about that. And some of the other things I'd see pictures of him or things in, oh yeah, he talked about that. And it was just pretty cool. And I've been back to that museum 4 or 5 times total now, because my sister doesn't live too far from it. And so I've taken my wife, I've taken my daughter, took my dad one time. So different trips to California, I've gone back to that museum, and it just brings back the memories of getting a chance to meet him. And also, they put in the plane now, the Air Force One. That was not there when I went in '93. That was there. They put that later, and they built an addition and put the Air Force One in there. So I have been back to see and go through that Air Force One as well.
So now, do all the former presidents have the Air Force Ones that they rode on at their presidential libraries?
No, I think that was the first presidential library to have one of the Air Force Ones.
Okay.
And it's made where you can walk through it. They it's a big building they added on, and actually the plane is inside, and you get to walk in, and you can walk down and see different parts of the plane and then walk back out. But I actually have a book on the shelf upstairs with all my Ronald Reagan books that's specifically about that plane and how they added it onto the museum. And I think that might have been the first, and it might be the only Air Force One that you can actually go see. I know when I went to President Nixon's library, which is also in California, it didn't have one.
Yeah, I would expect he'd have a Marine one, since he flew out in Marine one. So when you found out that you were going to get to meet him, and you saw the Burger King boys, what did
I didn't get to see them again.
Oh,
because that was a summer job, and it was October, and I was working at the food service and really had nothing to do with Burger King anymore. So I never got to go laugh in those guys' face and say, "Ha ha, I am meeting him."
So what did your family and friends have to say when you first told them, "Yeah, I've got a meeting with former President Reagan"?
My sister thought it was cool. My dad thought it was cool. My grandparents were super, 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 super hardcore Democrat Union folks, and they didn't think it was cool. My grandma thought it was a little cooler than my grandpa. He was the hardcore, had no use for Republicans. But my sister thought it was cool. My dad thought it was cool. Other friends at college thought it was really cool.
I would think it's totally. I mean, frankly, regardless of one's political affiliation, to be able to spend half an hour with the President of the United States, whomever that person is, I just think is an opportunity that marks people.
I agree. If I had a chance to go meet President Clinton, President Bush, President Obama, President Carter, President Trump, President Biden, I would take up any of those. I mean, obviously, I feel super honored because President Reagan was probably my favorite president, and not necessarily political views, but because of the communication. He inspired me to better my communication skills and to continue to better my communication skills. So if I had a chance to meet any of them, President Reagan would be the first person. And I was very fortunate to meet him. But I would love to meet any of the former presidents or vice presidents out there. I mean, I think you can learn and grow from any of that.
And as I think about President Reagan, as we're talking now, how he always had stories to tell, anecdotes to throw in, and he spoke at such an even pace.
He did. I mean, he was a master of that. I mean, look at the training he had. The training, with the movies and with the radio, and while he did have speech writers, he would help and fix things to personalize it, to make it more his own. And he was an expert at giving professionals presentations, but he was also an expert at that one-on-one. He was so personable. He was very charismatic and he was personable. It was like, for me, it was like talking to a grandfather. I'm sure if you were a contemporary of the same age, it'd be talking like to a brother or a good friend. He brought that out with a lot of people.
And that's a really impressive skill. I mean, although I can work a room, I guess would be the phrase, and have one-on-one conversations with people, that's different than having a conversation like you had with President Reagan, or standing up in front of people, to be able to balance those various skill sets of communication is something that people should be envious of, I think, and want to grow with.
I do too. I mean, that's why I continue to study. It's why I teach communication skills. I mean, I think they are probably the most important skills we learn. And I don't know why more people don't study and get better at communicating. And he's just one of many role models and people that I've admired that have sort of inspired me to try to become better.
So we've gone we're 15 seconds from 30 minutes. And frankly, I haven't asked you a single question that you had to reveal anything about yourself, because it's been all about former President Reagan today. So in our final minutes, why don't you tell the viewers and those on replay what's really, stuck with you all these years that you even still think about today related to former President Reagan?
I think the most important thing, when I started writing books, I wrote my first book in 1996, and I have 9 books now and 11 instructional DVDs. And I do some professional speaking and training, not to the level of some out there, but I do have people that write me and that want my autograph or want a picture with me or those kind of things. And I always have to make sure that be honored that they want my autograph or they want me to sign something or they want a picture with me, but to make sure that I give those people everything I can and never get to a level, I don't think I ever will, and if I do, I want somebody to kick me upside the head, that I think I don't have time for people, because he took 30 minutes of his day to give to me, a college student up from Montana, and signed my books for me and took some pictures with me. So I never want to be in a position where I can't give to anybody who requests it from me. That's one of the most important things I think that's really stuck with me.
That is phenomenal. Alain, thank you so much for joining us. And here we'll do the big voice on the 100th episode of Litvak Leadership Live. I cannot think of a better guest and a better story to hear than what you told us today.
The only thing that could have made it better, Sean,
is
if the 100th episode would have landed on Saturday and we would have done this Saturday.
Why is that?
Because that's President Reagan's birthday, February 6th.
There you go.
But we're pretty close. We were 2 days before his birthday, so we got it pretty dang close.
We got it close. That's awesome. So again, Alain, thank you so much for being on the show today. And everyone else, come back tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern. Different person, different topic, different geography, but just as encouraging. This is Litvak Leadership Live. Bye now.